Okay. Good morning, everybody. My name is Brittany Malley, and I'm the Quality Assurance Specialist at NDA. And today we're going to be talking about grants and how to successfully apply for them. Okay, so for our agenda today, we're going to talk first about a couple of grants that NDA has received recently from the USDA and what that means for you as a sponsor. And then we're going to talk about the grants that we administer to you guys. And then we're going to talk about tips for applying for grants and tips for having grant success, and then go over some common mistakes that are made. And then we're going to talk about the new NSLP equipment grant that we're going to release later today and take any questions that you guys might have. So to start with, we sent out an email about this, but we have some exciting news that we have received 2 different grants from the USDA that we applied for this summer, which is really great. The first one is called the Team Nutrition Training Grant, and it's a 3-year grant, so it'll end in 2019. And what this means for you as sponsors is that we're going to offer more regional trainings and more webinars each year for you guys. So for the Team Nutrition Grant, what we're going to focus on this spring, the trainings are going to be on HUSK, which is the Healthier U.S. Schools Challenge, and Smarter Lunchrooms Movement. Okay, so we're going to have more trainings on those this spring. And then also later in the spring, we're going to have some regional trainings on school wellness policy implementation. And then next school year for 2017-18, and the spring of 2018, we're going to put on 2 school wellness conferences. And then we're also going to offer some one-on-one culinary trainings. So that's going to be in 5 areas in Nevada. They're going to really focus on conducting student taste tests and implementing new items to the menu, as well as some other things. So that's for the Team Nutrition Grant. And then the second grant that we applied for and received is called the Administrative Review Training Grant. And it's also a 3-year grant, so it'll end in 2019, the same time that the Team Nutrition Grant does. And this grant has 2 parts to it. Half of it is more trainings for you guys. Since it's called the Admin Review Training Grant, we wanted to really focus on some areas that we found came up with more issues throughout the admin reviews. So we really want to hone in on those and get people trained in that to cut down on those errors. The first one is about CEP and Provision 2, which will offer regional trainings in this in 2017 for that, as well as a webinar this spring. And then in 2018, the focus for the trainings is going to be on procurement and food service management companies. And in 2019, the trainings are going to focus on the new sodium targets, offer versus serve, the reimbursable meals, and how to implement fruit and veggie bars in school lunchrooms. And like I said, all 3 of those will have webinars that go along with them if you're not able to make any of the trainings. And then the second half of this grant is we are working with the Nevada Department of Education to get a state level direct certification match implemented for SNAP, TANF, and FDPIR. So right now you guys do the DC match at a local level. We want to change it and get it implemented so that it's done at the state level. Okay, so that'll take off a lot of the burden on you guys as the sponsors. And as a part of getting that statewide match implemented, we're setting that up for us to participate in a project next school year that will implement direct certification with Medicaid. So we applied to be a part of that project, and we'll find out in a few weeks if we get to. So that one's still up in the air, but hopefully that'll get implemented as well, and we'll let you know as soon as we do hear about that. And trainings and technical assistance will be offered as a part of this process because we know this will be something new for you guys and will require some training. So we will get some training offered for you guys on that as well. Okay, so this next slide is just a timeline for our training offered for this school year. Since we did get these 2 grants, we do have a lot more trainings to schedule. So like I said, for this year it's going to be CEP and Provision 2. It's going to be the focus for the art grant trainings. And those are going to be regional. One will be held in Elko, one in Reno, and one in Las Vegas. And then the other regional training will be the Smarter Lunchrooms training. The first one of those will be held in January in Reno, and then the other 2 will be held in March for Elko and Las Vegas. And then we're also going to have the school wellness policy implementation trainings towards the end of April and early May. Okay, so we don't have specific dates set for those. We kind of set aside weeks, and we're in the process of getting trainers contracted to provide these trainings for you guys as well. So as we get more information and solid dates, we'll send that out for you. We'll send that out to you guys. Okay, so now we're going to move on and talk about grants that we administer to you, the sponsors. So we get funding from the USDA to allocate to the sponsors in our state. And the first grant that we do is the NSLP Equipment Assistance Grant. And the application period for this grant varies each year. It really depends on when we have finished giving out all the funding from the previous grant, because we don't want to start on a new grant if we haven't already used up all the funding from the previous one. So the most recent one we administered was in March of 2016. We sent out a request for application and we got a great response for it. We gave up over, I think, $200,000 for that one. And for this type of grant, the funds allow SFAs to purchase equipment to help serve healthier meals that meet the updated meal patterns, with emphasis on more fruits and vegetables in school meals, improved quality of food, improved food safety, and expand access to meals to children. The priority is given to high-need schools who have a free and reduced lunch rate of 50% or greater, and the equipment that you're requesting must be at least $5,000 or greater. We'll talk more about the requirements in a little bit for this grant. So here's just a snapshot of the last 2 rounds of this grant that we have awarded money. The first one on the left-hand side is from 2014 and 15. The total grant awards we gave away was $399,000. And this is eligible for RCCIs and sponsors as well, as long as you're on the NSLP program. And the graph can just give you a little idea of the different types of equipment that were purchased. And then on the right-hand side, this is the most recent grant that we awarded, which was in March, and we gave awards for $226,000 about. Okay, so you can see the different schools and RCCIs that received funding and the different equipment that they bought. So there's lots of times there's refrigerators, freezers, ovens, and dishwashers that are purchased. But you can see in here there's a tilt skillet that was bought, a salad bar, a large griddle that had 2 ovens underneath. And if there's something that's not on the list of approved equipment, you can email us and ask for a request to purchase it or to apply for it, okay? But that's all in the application instructions for this grant. The other grant that we administer every year is the Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program grant. The application for this is always done in the spring, and this grant aims to increase fruit and vegetable consumption amongst elementary students at schools with high rates of free and reduced lunch. So to qualify and be eligible for this grant, it must be an elementary school, and the schools have to have a 50% or greater free and reduced lunch. Students selected for the program will receive $50 to $75 per student to provide fresh fruit and vegetables 2 times a week to students outside of the school breakfast and lunch program. So these fruits and vegetables cannot be served during breakfast or lunch. In 2015, there was 85 schools that applied for this grant, and then in 2016, which was this last school year, we had 91 schools who applied. And that means, as you can see, we are getting more schools to apply each year, and that number really is going to keep increasing as this program becomes more popular, and schools really do see the benefit to having being a part of this program. So what that means is that it's going to become more competitive, and the application process is going to become more competitive, which means that your application is going to be scored, and it's going to be really important about what kind of information you put into the application. And the NSLP equipment grant is also becoming more competitive. This last round of funding that we gave away this last year was we had more requests for funds than we actually had. So we did have to deny some applications, and we had to tell a couple of sponsors that they didn't score high enough to receive the funding that they requested. So with all that being said, we're going to talk about tips for success and applying for these grants since they are becoming more competitive. Okay, so your applications and what you put into them really is going to mean a lot for you guys to receive these funds. So to start with, I want to talk about the request for application, and this is also known as the RFA. So we send this out when we are releasing a grant opportunity, and the first thing you should do is read through this whole thing. Okay, and they're really not too long, but they're really important because this has all the information about the grant and what we need from you when applying. So this is the table of contents from our equipment grant. And as you can see, there's a lot of different topics and information that is covered in it, as far as, goes from the application deadline, how much funding is available, who's eligible to even apply and receive funding from this grant, a timeline, a checklist, which is important, we'll talk about later. Just a lot of different things and topics are covered in the RFA. So you should read it to start with, and you should refer back to it throughout the application process. The second thing I want to talk about is the application itself. You want to read through it once before starting to fill it out. Okay, and you want to note the application due date and find out which schools are eligible and what you can ask for with this funding. Okay, you want to gather everything you need to complete the application before starting it, so you have everything together, and then you want to use a checklist to complete the application. So we do provide checklists in the RFA, and the checklists are meant to be used. There are multiple forms that are requested as a part of the application, so having the checklist handy really does help for you to remember to complete and send in all the required forms. And I also want you to know you can call or email me with any questions about the applications at any time. And then also an important part of the application is following the directions for filling it out. Okay, so we do send out application instructions with the application, and just pay attention to what exactly we're asking for. A perfect example is sign in blue ink, which we'll talk about later too. But we get a lot of applications that come in and they're not in blue ink, and it's just a very simple thing. Okay. Okay, the second thing we want to talk about are due date and deadlines. You want to aim to have your application in several days or at least a week before the due date, just in case something is missing or you forgot something. If you send something in the last day, it's going to be hard to get what you missed or what is required in by the due date, okay? So there are no exceptions. We can't accept an application or pieces of the application after the due date. So if you sent in the majority of your application early and you forgot one piece of paper, if it's not in by a 5 o'clock deadline of the due date, we can't accept your application and it won't be considered for funding, okay? So mark your calendars early for when the due date is and try and work ahead. The next thing I want to talk about are the narrative questions. Most of the applications that we send out for grants have a couple of narrative questions on them. The equipment grant has a couple of sections, and then the fresh fruit and vegetable grant has quite a bit of the application are actually narrative questions. So the ones on this slide are from the fresh fruit and vegetable grant. But these narrative questions are an area where it's a chance to give more detail and explain how and why you will need and use these funds. Okay, so we want you to write for review, not for you. And what this means is when you're writing out the answers to these questions, you want to write them as if you're kind of picturing what the reviewer is reading. Okay, so you don't want to assume that they know everything about your school or about things that you're talking about in this question. Like you would, okay? So you want to write for the reviewer, so you want to give more detail and more background and not for you because you know all this background information, okay? So if you answer it like you're going to be reading it, then you're not going to be providing enough information for the reviewer. And this is a more subjective section, which means this is where you can set your application apart from the others, okay? It's not the objective questions like what is your free and reduced lunch percentage, or what is the size of your school, how many students do you have. Those are things and numbers that you can't change, okay? But the subjective section with these narrative questions is something where you can set yourself apart from the other applications. And if you're submitting multiple site applications, you want to try and make sure that you answer individually to each site if possible, okay? If you're just copying and pasting the same answer into the narrative section for each site application, we can tell, and we want you to kind of put more thought and detail into these different site applications, especially if they're different, okay? We want you to note why they're different and why they need this specific piece of equipment or how they're going to work with this fresh fruit and vegetable program. Okay, the next thing is the scoring rubric. We do post the rubric and the criteria that we use to score and judge our applications. So this is posted online, and I think we even send it out as part of the application packet. And this scoring rubric really is just a cheat sheet for you guys. Okay, this tells you exactly what we're looking for, what we're scoring, and how many points we're giving for them. And like I just mentioned, you can't really do much about the objective measures such as the free and reduced lunch percentage or the number of students in your school, but you can use the narrative questions to make up points that you might lack for the objective measures, okay? All right, so now we're going to talk about some of the common mistakes that we see when the applications are submitted. The first one are forms that are missing. A good example is with the equipment grant forms. The application does have several forms that are included as a part of it. So the school kitchen info sheet is missed often, and the SFA contact info form. So this goes back to using that checklist that we send out with the RFA to make sure you have all the forms needed and filled out to submit with your application. Like I mentioned earlier, the signature not being in blue ink gets missed a lot. So I think it's just a general good rule. If you're going to send and sign anything and give it back to NDA, it should be in blue ink. We always ask for anything that we want you guys to sign and give back to us to be in blue ink. So just kind of get it in your heads right now. If it's going to NDA, use a blue pen, okay? And then another area is that sometimes sections are left blank on the application. If a section or a question doesn't apply to you, please write in there not applicable or doesn't apply, because if you leave it blank, then we just think you missed it or just didn't want to fill it out. And then the last thing are missed deadlines. So, we talked about this a lot already, but you want to, make sure you get it in at least a few days before, if not a week or more before, just in case you forgot something, okay? Missed deadlines are an easy denial for us, okay? We don't even look at your application, we just put it in the no pile. So just a few things to remember. You want to proofread your application and any forms that you're sending us. Check them for grammar mistakes, spelling mistakes. Make sure everything is clear and concise and makes sense. So you want to have someone else read through it to make sure everything is clear and makes sense. And having another set of eyes to catch errors is always a good thing. You want to read any narrative sections out loud to yourself. If you read something out loud, you can tell, it's easier to tell if something sounds right and makes sense. Sometimes when you're reading it, you don't always catch things like that. And then, like I said, with the deadlines, you don't want to wait until the last minute to work on and submit the application. Try and set calendar reminders to help you complete the application on time. And then going back to the checklist, run through the checklist before submitting. Okay, that checklist is made to help you guys not forget anything for the application. So please use the checklists. Okay. So going back to the Equipment Assistance Grant, our new one that we're going to release today, I'm going to send out an email with all the necessary applications, instructions, and forms, and we will also post it onto our website. So that's being released today. The applications are going to be due Friday, December 9th by 5 p.m. So it is over 2 months away, so you guys will have plenty of time to work on it and plenty of time for questions and if you guys have any. And for this round, we have $238,944 available in funding. Okay, so that's a good amount of money. So please apply. You know, we do want to give all this money away. We want to give it away the first time, okay? So, yeah, so if you've gotten equipment last round, don't be afraid to apply for this as well if there is equipment that you need. And like I mentioned earlier, equipment must be over $5,000 to qualify. I think a lot of people are trying, you guys are in the mindset of, okay, try and find the cheapest thing, the cheapest piece of equipment. It has to be over $5,000 or you can't request it, okay? So we do ask as a part of the application for you to submit 3 quotes for each piece of equipment. So out of those quotes, then you can choose the cheapest one, but they do all have to be over $5,000. So if you guys have any questions about applying for this grant or what kind of equipment you can ask for, don't hesitate to call or email me, but do read the RFA first. There's a lot of information in that request for application. Okay, so last, these are a few other foundations that have opportunities for funding and other grants that you can apply for. Okay, so you can apply for grants outside of just NDA. The first one is Action for Healthy Kids. They have a few grants that are available. Then there's Fuel Up to Play 60. They have funding available as well. And then the last is the Alliance for a Healthier Generation. And they have several other funding opportunities if you guys are interested. And if you guys need help for applying for those too, you can always ask us, but they have contact information on their sites as well. So that's it for the grants webinar. Here's my contact information if you guys have any questions about the trainings we're going to offer from our Team Nutrition grant or our ART training grant. And if you have any questions about the NSLP equipment grant or anything that we talked about today, you guys can always email or call me later, and then we'll take questions right now if anybody has any questions about the webinar today. Okay. Okay, so we do have one question right now. So about the equipment grant, they're asking, is it $5,000 per item or a grand total? So it's for the equipment grant, it has to be $5,000 per piece of equipment that you're asking for. Installation. Okay, and installation can be included in that quote for that equipment to get you to that $5,000 if you're close, if it's just under. Okay, so yeah, each piece of equipment has to be $5,000. And delivery and tax as well included? Yes. Yeah, so you can include all of those fees in that quote. Okay, we have another question for Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program. Will the increase in schools and Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program, with the increase in schools, in the first written vegetable program will twice a week maybe go to once a week for service? Okay, so the answer is no. And you need to think about that ahead of time when you're applying for the grant. So you want to think about trying to be more cost effective in the produce you're buying for these tastings. So yeah, we're not going to drop it down to once a week just to provide more funding to offer it to more schools. Okay, so we'll wait a minute for any more questions anybody has. Okay, so I don't see any more questions. And if you guys think of something later, go ahead and call and email me. And thank you for attending today's webinar on grant success.